Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about simplifying application and infrastructure management with VMware Tanzu. So before we start, something about me. So my name is Anže Marinčič. I've been with NIL for 13 years. I've spent almost five years in South Africa dealing with South Africa's biggest service providers. This was also part of NIL's experience. A little bit more than a year ago, I took over the role of IT architect inside NIL. I'm involved in data center technologies with different vendors, but mostly Cisco, VMware, F5, Palo Alto. And a lot of my projects at NIL had some sort of automation component in them. So I'm quite involved in IT infrastructure automation. So on the personal side, I have a family, I have two kids, so especially now with this Corona situation and working from home, it's never boring. I learn new things every day, how to multitask and so on, because I was under the impression that I cannot multitask. I really enjoy playing basketball, and I can't wait to get on vacation on the seaside. So everything related to the sea, I'm really interested in. We'll talk about NIL a little bit as well, so introduction about NIL. So we are based in Slovenia, but we have offices in Canada, Morocco, South Africa, and Middle East as well. We've been part of Consha Group since 2019. We provide basically advanced IT infrastructure service solutions, services, consulting, and we are also a training provider. So our main areas of focus are data center and cloud, networking, IT, cybersecurity, modern workspace, and collaboration. So VMware is our very important technology partner. We also hold the VMware Principal Partner designation. So this is the P's and C's that we have to go through when we start the webinars, but now let's look at the agenda. So first we'll talk about some today's business challenges and technology trends. Then we will look at VMware Tanzu product portfolio. And at the end, I will try to summarize what we talked about, and we will also have a slot, as I mentioned, for Q&A. You can write your questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx client. I won't be following this during the presentation, but at the end of the presentation, I will go through any questions and try to provide the answer. So, what are the main reasons or some of the reasons that enterprises are modernizing? So definitely one is that you always try to build new revenue generating customer experience. So this is basically you have to provide, or you try to provide, a compelling digital experience for your customers in order to grow your revenues. The second one is that you have to manage growing volume of software and vulnerabilities. So there is a lot of going on in terms of how the software is deployed in production, how to manage the vulnerabilities, because every software has bugs and vulnerabilities, and it's really important that you evolve or that you try to involve your infrastructure and applications in order to address these challenges. It's also about, so the cloud maybe is becoming more relevant because new innovations are offered by all these different cloud providers. In the recent year or so, cloud providers also figured out that they will have to implement more interoperability options between their clouds in order for customers to really start consuming their services. So it's basically the drive or trying to see how cloud can help you deliver your business or support your business needs. Another very important area is that you should or you have to start embracing new technologies. So if you look at the software development space, containers are becoming really popular because they offer certain advantages. And this is now the challenge that you have to somehow manage all these new the new technology that is introduced in your infrastructure. So another point might be that you want to improve your business continuity. It's very important, as we've seen with this Corona situation, that you have to have some sort of plan in case of some disasters or uncertain things that can happen in the world. This area is often overlooked, but it's with this new or the technologies that are evolving, I think it's becoming a bit easier to implement a proper business continuity plan in your companies. But of course, there might be something else. So I'm not sure what your challenges, what challenges do you have with day-to-day operations and so on. So please think about your challenges or plans, and try to place these technologies that we will talk about today into your perspective, and see if they can solve some of your challenges and implement the plans that you have. So one thing that is definitely happening is that the definition of application is changing. So we're used to the virtualization took over the world 10 years ago, and it's becoming the de facto standard, the de facto technology in the data centers. And usually the applications consist of a couple of VMs where you have an application database. Data is stored locally on these VMs, and basically you have to build your operations around this application design. But the modern applications with new technologies like containers and container orchestrations like Kubernetes, these modern apps are more like distributed systems. So when you look at it from the application perspective, it's easier, or it should be easier to introduce new technology or new functionalities into the application if the application is not one big monolithic application, but if it's spread out across different smaller systems. And these systems talk to each other. So the main driver behind these are containers. So maybe I'm 100% sure you've already heard about containers, but just a quick explanation what containers are. So it's a way to package up the applications and dependencies, and it also guarantees execution consistency and portability. With this, but on the other hand, it still offers isolation between these applications. So you have to understand that containers are not microservices. Containers are enablers for microservices and building the applications with microservices technologies. So basically, we come up to a point where all these new modern applications are also called cloud-native applications. And the Kubernetes cluster, if you're not familiar with it, it's an open-source container orchestration system for basically automating deployment, scaling, and management of containerized applications. It's also, in a way, a platform for building platforms, because the Kubernetes itself is built with modularity in mind. So you can, for example, use different networking plugins that offer networking functionality to the containers or pods that are deployed on Kubernetes clusters. It also became kind of the de facto standard for running containerized applications. And you also have some relatively new technologies or principles of developing the technologies, which is called serverless computing, which is basically a function as a service where the platform provides everything for you, but the developer only has to deploy the code, so the function, and the platform runs this code. And so, but on the other hand, for example, databases, or how the database technology, how the databases work hasn't changed much. So you end up with a application design that consumes these new technologies, let's say the cloud native applications, but on the other hand, you have to provide services that are still based on technologies that we know today, for example, database. And it becomes quite complex to manage all this. So when we talk about containers, Kubernetes, function as a service, and so on, we talked about cloud-native applications. And the cloud, so there is a cloud-native computing foundation. It basically emerged because of a need to govern these technologies that enable development of cloud-native applications. And this cloud-native landscape is massive. There is a lot of technologies. There's a lot of incubating projects. Some are ready for production, some are not. But basically, you can get a glance into what's going on in this cloud-native landscape. But on the other hand, when you look at the DevOps tools, it's pretty much the same. There is a lot of DevOps tools available. So again, if you want to introduce continuous integration, continuous development into your processes or integrate them into your processes, you have to somehow be able to decide which tools are appropriate for me. And sometimes this is really difficult, and all these open source projects, sometimes it's very hard to maintain them. It's fine if you deploy it for, let's say, a proof of concept, but when you start deploying these tools in production, it becomes a bit of a challenge. So I think that the enterprise modernization is challenging. So VMware did research between the CEOs, and results are that 78% of participants in this research expressed the need that improving application portfolio is a top priority, but on the other hand, 48% of participants said that they have not made any improvements in the last year. I think that this is, even though it's a VMware research, I think that the same applies if you look at your market, or even in Slovenian market, which is definitely smaller. So, what are the main reasons behind this? Why are we not improving our applications and infrastructure? So definitely, as we talked about, matching the best platform to each application is extremely challenging. Every application has its own requirements in terms of how to scale up and scale down these applications. Trying to get the right platform that will satisfy all the capabilities is basically very hard. It's also difficult to scale the IT infrastructure. So it might, when you look at some PowerPoints, yeah, you just add the server, you do this, you do that, and bam, you have a never-ending resources. In reality, it's not that simple. The major problem is also, or challenge is that we have legacy applications, and these legacy applications will change. Just for keeping the lights on, it takes too much time in order to move forward. And of course, the general IT complexity, where you have to, if you look at how you do it today, when the application has to be deployed, you have to document all the requirements, you have to satisfy all the dependencies, you have to deploy. This is usually, or might not be, depends how far you went with automation, but usually it's a manual approach where you basically, the developer says, I have a new app, then the Ops team tries to deploy this app, it doesn't work, and it's ping-ponging, opening tickets and so on, and you have to open the traffic flows, and becomes a bit of a mess. So the main questions are, how do we move towards modern application with greater velocity? So basically, how do we introduce new functionalities faster, and how to operate this modern infrastructure, but we don't compromise scalability when we scale it. To be honest, it comes down to something that's nothing new. Basically, this mantra or holy grail has been present since probably the beginning of IT. It's how to deliver quality software faster and reliably. So when we talked about cloud-native applications, so the need for this type of applications, that's my opinion, came from big companies like Facebook, Twitter, Netflix, maybe gigantic enterprises, where their applications have gazillion users that they have to serve. They have to serve a lot of users at the same point in time, which means that the option to scale these applications is really important. They have to span this application across multiple data centers, not just 2, maybe 4, 5, 10, and even across geographical regions. And they have, basically, these are their requirements. When I was thinking about this, most probably a lot of you don't have such complex and big applications, but I wouldn't say that the technology that is introduced because of these requirements doesn't apply to you. Basically, if you start embracing new approaches and technologies, this should make your life easier on the long run. You just have to figure out what works for you and what are the requirements, and in order you just take the best out of this cloud-native landscape or space. So one of the reasons or examples are that you can improve application flow traceability, for example, for troubleshooting. You can implement rolling upgrades. You can test new functionalities on subset of users and decoupling data from applications. And this basically allows you that it's easier to implement disaster recovery scenarios, because you don't have to worry about the data that's inside the application or the VM or whatever, but you deal with storage replication as a whole. So let's see how VMware Tanzu can potentially help. The Tanzu product portfolio is massive. So if you look at the functionalities they offer, it's very big. These functionalities also are still evolving, and we will just scratch the surface today, just to give you a feel what these products are all about. But each product definitely requires a dedicated session in order to get to know it. So in order to get it to know better. So basically, if you look at, we were talking about application and infrastructure modernization. So the products are somehow split into these areas as well, which basically means that either you can start on the application modernization side or the infrastructure modernization side. VMware doesn't want to enforce how you approach this modernization. So let's go through each product and just highlight the main functionalities. So Tanzu Kubernetes Grid is basically the most basic thing that actually enables other Tanzu products in the portfolio. So it's basically a universal runtime built on open source technologies, and you can deploy it across different clouds. It's a certified cloud-native computing foundation, and through the Kubernetes Software Conformance Certification Program. Tanzu Kubernetes Grid is an enterprise-ready Kubernetes runtime that you can deploy and use. It also includes multi-cluster lifecycle management, so you can deploy highly available Kubernetes clusters, and they include open source local and in-cluster services like Fluentbit for logging, Calico for container networking, and so on. And VMware also offers 24/7 production support on Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. vSphere 7 with Kubernetes is probably the biggest change or enhancement when it comes to vSphere product. So the main point is that vSphere 7 with Kubernetes is basically a unified platform for virtual machines and containers. Basically, the idea is that infrastructure admins or VI admins can still use Virtual Center and the tools that they're familiar with, but on the other hand, enable the developers to start consuming Kubernetes or even vSphere native pods. So it's like a dual approach where you start enabling the developers that they start consuming resources on your infrastructure in a dynamic way through Kubernetes, but on the other hand, the IT operators are using the tools that they're already familiar with, which is basically a vCenter server, and start deploying these services or the infrastructure, managing and deploying the infrastructure so the developers can consume them. So it's basically a dev and IT ops collaboration kind of approach, and it's bundled in one product, which is vSphere 7 with Kubernetes. I think this is a really exciting technology. It's relatively new. I think it's very exciting. So Tanzu Mission Control is basically a centralized management of policy and security for all the Kubernetes clusters. So you may end up with a lot of Kubernetes clusters that are provisioned either on Amazon Cloud, on Google Cloud, on Azure Cloud, or even vSphere on-prem installations. So it becomes a problem because all these different cloud providers and vSphere have their own management interfaces and so on. So basically, Tanzu Mission Control tries to abstract this and offers a single pane of glass for management. It also offers identity and access across different clusters, Kubernetes clusters, security configuration, audit and compliance, and data protection. So it's like a management of all these Kubernetes clusters on different platforms. It's important to know that this is a software as a service offering from VMware, so you have to keep this in mind when you think about this product. So Tanzu Service Mesh. So before we go into details, let's talk about what Service Mesh is all about. It's basically a way to control how different parts of your applications, microservices, can talk to each other and share data with one another. So basically, Service Mesh offers service discovery, identity, it enforces policies, and it takes care of traffic routing, east, west, north, south, or basically egress and egress traffic flows. So Tanzu Service Mesh is based on Istio, if you've heard about it, and it basically provides more than Istio. So the idea is that you can deploy Tanzu Service Mesh across different clusters again, and then you can provide different Kubernetes clusters, on-prem public clouds, but you have the same way of managing and controlling access to these services that are, or pods, containers, applications that are deployed on these Kubernetes clusters. One thing that it's really interesting is that by the end of the year, so I heard, it's not a committed, but apparently by the end of the year, VMware will extend this service mesh across VMware virtual machines, some software as a service products, and serverless computing. They will extend it across these different technologies as well, which means that you get a centralized management of service mesh across these different technologies, which is really exciting. Because you have to connect, you definitely, as we talked about, you have to connect, for example, these modern applications with existing applications when it comes to databases, for example, or whatever application you already have in your infrastructure. So what are the main use cases or highlights of the Tanzu Service Mesh? We talked about a couple of them already, but maybe the big one, or we will just talk about for which I think are the most important ones is, for example, it provides end-to-end encryption between all these microservices for compliance. So it has an integrated certificate authority. The certificates are rolled automatically. This way you can ensure that even though the traffic goes between your private cloud or public cloud, this traffic is always encrypted between these microservices. It also provides controlled service deployments and upgrades. What this means is VMware actually takes care of the upgrade path for you. If you look at, I was playing with Istio a little bit, and it becomes really challenging, for example, once you deploy it, it becomes challenging how to upgrade and maintain these Istio instances. So with Service Mesh, basically VMware takes care of this, and it's a controlled service deployment and upgrades, which means that you ensure that you don't have too much downtime when you're managing this implementation. Tanzu Application Catalog is basically an offering that combines content and tools to allow IT to consume open source products on their infrastructure or public clouds. So the idea is that VMware is curating this upstream application catalog, and you consume this, you take this application, because if you look at MySQL Server, there are different ways how to deploy it. Yeah? So either you have to go and have a look and start planning this, or maybe VMware take this responsibility and tells you, okay, you can deploy MySQL Server as a standalone, or you can deploy it as a highly available cluster. You take these definitions, you take them, you can customize them, and then deploy it in your private or platforms that you're using, either public or private. The nice thing is that you can also you can include these applications or definitions in your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines. So it's basically an on-prem implementation at the end. So the Tanzu Application Service is a massive product. It's basically a platform as a service product, and it offers all the requirements that your applications need in terms of how to deploy the application, how to encrypt traffic between the applications, day 2 microservice management. It provides load balancing capabilities, service mesh. It's a really massive product, but the main point is that you can use a magical, so-called magical CF command, which the idea is that developer only provides the code, then it uses CF push command, and then the build packs actually take care of the application deployment. So you don't have to deal with how do I package my application into a container, what is the best practice around building these containers. The platform itself takes care of this. It's also a very important aspect is also the service market option, where you basically can get supporting services like MySQL database as a service. So you just type in CF provision service, and the MySQL database gets provisioned for you. The platform provisions this for you. It's the best runtime for Spring and Spring Boot. Basically, this is a Java development framework, but this doesn't mean that only this framework is supported. They also support .NET framework, native Windows .NET experience, and for example, you can deploy PHP applications, Python applications, and so on. So it's not just about Java, it's also about other technologies as well. Yeah, it's basically the idea is that you deploy your code to production thousands of times per month. So if you have a lot of applications, you have to deploy them on a daily basis. This is definitely a product for you. So if we move on, Tanzu observability. The product is called Wavefront, but the idea is that on all these applications, microservices, virtual machines, infrastructure, whatever you have, you can configure, let's call them agents. And these agents are sending certain information to Wavefront Cloud. And from these Wavefront Clouds, you can get out the metrics, histograms, traces, logs. You can troubleshoot, you can visualize the traffic flows. You can also predict what's going to happen. So it's basically observability with artificial intelligence analytics at its core. And it's also a software as a service offering from VMware. So if we sum it up, if we put all these different applications together, all these different bits and pieces, it's a very compelling portfolio for application and infrastructure modernization that VMware offers. You can definitely, basically, one thing is that you get an integrated solution for managing your infrastructure and applications. So there is no discrepancy. I mean, VMware is still working to really integrate these products, but it doesn't matter. They're already quite integrated. As you remember, I mean, if you've heard, a lot of these products came from acquisitions that VMware did in the last couple of years. For example, Pivotal Software, Bitnami company. So, but VMware was already involved before they made the acquisitions. They were already involved in these products acquired. So there was already integration in place. But now this packaging becomes really compelling. But one thing that is also important is the methodology, how you approach with application deployment, infrastructure management, and this is where the DevOps comes in. So it's not an easy thing. So the basic thing of DevOps, or maybe let's say the easiest way to describe DevOps is that you try to automate as much as possible when it comes to application and infrastructure management, deployment, and so on. So if you deploy something in development environment, it's really easy to do the same in production environment as well. With this automation in place, you ensure that when you deploy new services, that these actions do not compromise the availability and the availability of your infrastructure and application. So how would somebody approach this modernization? So we see that there is an evolution going on in different directions. When it comes, you have an application evolution where we had years back, we have even today we have bare metal installations, then the virtualization come, and now the microservices. We have data center evolution where we had on-prem installation, it was cloud, and now the hybrid options are becoming really feasible because all the technologies that these cloud providers are offering. And the most, let's say, complex one is the management and operations evolution. So it's becoming more and more important that when you start embracing these new ways of delivering the data center or infrastructure and developing the applications, that this DevOps becomes really important. And this DevOps is actually changing how your organization is structured and what people do inside this organization. So the silos have to be broken down, and you don't have silos in terms of security team, developer team, infrastructure team, because if you want to start consuming this infrastructure dynamically, you have to start spreading out the responsibility across all these teams. And how do we see this approach? How do we think it makes sense? So basically, one thing is that definitely a guidance assessment on infrastructure applications is a start. So you have to see, maybe the legacy term for application is not right, but for sake of the discussion, you have to see how many legacy applications you have on the network. So you have to make a decision if this application can be deployed on this new infrastructure, what functionalities do you need, if you have a lot of legacy, if you have legacy applications, how to interconnect legacy with new applications or new world. And basically it's a guided assessment that we look what do we currently have. So another important point is that you have to align technical and business requirements. So it might mean that technical requirements are not following the business requirements, but when it comes to the deployment of this solution, we have to be certain that the solution that we offer actually challenges the most critical challenges and problems that you have. And the biggest one is, of course, because of this new approaches of, let's say, DevOps methodology, you kind of have to, or you must, although using the word must is not the best, you have to adjust the culture. And this is the hardest part. I've been involved in certain projects that were not successful just because the different teams couldn't start working with each other. So this is an ongoing process, and if not everybody is on board in changing how they do things, then it's maybe better to leave the things as they are today. So once all this is done and we have the clear let's say, customer requirements, what do we have to do? We, of course, move to design, deploy, and support phase. But what is really important is the enable phase as well. Because, as I mentioned, DevOps engineers are kind of not a new breed, but it's a different breed of engineers, because they have to be aware of how applications work or how they're designed and how to deploy them on this infrastructure that you have. So upskilling has to happen in order for this that you get this new breed of engineers. So as I mentioned, we are working in the learning services space a lot. So I'm definitely 100% convinced that you can enable your engineers to overcome this challenge. And of course, because you can't do everything at once, you have to evolve the solution. You basically have to go through this assessment again. You have to align the business requirements, and slowly but surely you have to adjust the culture, because not everything can be done at once. And another thing is that maybe we looked at software-defined data center technologies from VMware, but all these technologies have to run on physical hardware. So we have a lot of experience with designing the networks, supporting these physical networks, because this physical network is as important as the overlay that you put on top. So basically, we are at the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, just add them to the Q&A, and I will double check if we have some questions or not. Okay, I have a question. You've mentioned that some of the products are offered as software as a service. Do you know if VMware has plans to release an on-premise versions? So as far as I know, the products like Wavefront, Mission Control, and Service Mesh, I'm not 100% sure, but currently, as far as I know, this will not be released as on-prem versions, which means that you have to be careful when you start consuming them or using them. So 2 months ago, I was 100% sure that certain things cannot happen. But with this Corona situation, everything changed. And while I was thinking about this software as a service products, is this is hosted in a VMware cloud on a VMware infrastructure somewhere. It might be in, I don't know, Ireland, United States, or whatever the local presence VMware has. But the fact is that they don't have a local presence in Slovenia. So I'm not sure if you use my imagination, how will your products work if, for example, Slovenia loses connectivity with external world? So the connectivity inside Slovenia works between the service provider, but there is no outside connectivity. Well, your solution doesn't really work anymore. So it's really important when you think about the requirements that you have, that you take this component into consideration. But on the other hand, if VMware doesn't release on-premise versions and it kind of the product that doesn't work for you, there are also other approaches and other vendors that might offer similar functionality, just the integration is a bit different, and automation on top of this can solve certain challenges. I hope I answered the question. And we have another one. The VMware NSX is not mentioned in Tanzu product portfolio. What is the status of NSX? So yeah, we talked about service mesh, NSX service mesh, but NSXT is not going anywhere. It's basically a prerequisite, and it's tightly integrated into this Tanzu portfolio. It basically provides container to container, container to VM, VM to VM, under some networking portion, and it also enforces the policies. So basically, we have a pod. You can configure that this pod can talk to other VMs, or it cannot talk to other VMs. So it's basically the same thing as you're doing today with VM to VM traffic. And another important, let's say, part of NSXT is that it provides ingress and load balancer functionality for Kubernetes clusters, as well as network address translation, port address translation, and so on. But yeah, on the other hand, if you think about it, the Tanzu Kubernetes Grid supports other Kubernetes networking plugins, not just NSXT. It supports Calico, for example. So you're free to choose and implement networking, container networking in other ways, but then you have to have skills to support this implementation or technology. And for example, Calico per se does not support load balancing capabilities and visibility troubleshooting. So you're basically in the third-party hardware software solution that you have to manage. And we have another one. Can we talk about pricing? No, unfortunately, I cannot talk about pricing on this webinar, but if you're interested, we can definitely arrange a one-on-one session. And there's another one you haven't talked. There was no talk about DevOps tools. What is VMware doing in this space? So yeah, VMware is trying to position, because of time, I couldn't include this portion as well, but VMware is enhancing VMware vRealize automation as a DevOps tool for CI/CD. So there is a lot of enhancement already integrated in vRealize Automation 8, and it's under a name, I think it's vRealize Automation Code Stream. But also, I mentioned that VMware did a lot of acquisitions last year, and the important one was Pivotal Software. They also, so Pivotal had, or still has, Pivotal Concourse, which is continuous integration tool, and they also supported Spinnaker, which is continuous delivery tool. So there are DevOps tools that you can get from VMware. I'm not entirely sure what happened to these products or if you can still order them, but I'm sure there is a way that you can consume them. So overall, I think the VMware can offer an integrated and kind of a holistic solution for up to the DevOps layer as well. But yeah, keep in mind that this is not everything that you need. You still need some, in order to really implement DevOps, you need some sort of version control system like Git and ticketing system, flexible ticketing system like Jira and so on. So yeah, but probably 80%, 90% of functionalities can be achieved with VMware products. You can, okay, just a conclusion. So, I already mentioned in the beginning that the Tanzu product portfolio is massive. So if you have some additional questions that might pop up tomorrow or 2 days from now, you can definitely send me questions on my email address. If you want to know more about certain product, you can also send me a suggestion which product is the most interesting one, and maybe we can arrange another webinar session. But on the other hand, we can also arrange a one-on-one session to further discuss different topics that we briefly touched on today. So thank you for joining this webinar. I hope that your expectations were met, and that you found something useful in the last 45 minutes or so. The new way of saying goodbye is keep safe and healthy.